Good. Welcome back for our next presentation. This is, as I mentioned earlier, an important new component to our CINR this year because we're going to be integrating the NSUF and all of its capabilities associated with their programs and separate funding with our program in EUP and NEAT as well. So I'm going to invite to the podium now Rory Kennedy, who's just come on board, I guess, this past year to lead the program and build it up, and I think work with a variety of partnerships and collaborations. And so Rory's been at the Idaho National Lab, Dr. Kennedy, for a number of years, and so he has an excellent background in working with universities as well. So Rory, please join us.
Thank you, John. So it's a pleasure for me to be here and to give this short presentation along with Dan Ogden on the integration of the Advanced Test Reactor National Scientific User facility into the Consolidated Innovative Research FOA. Now, for those of you, I'm going to start out, for those of you who aren't familiar with the NSUF, I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of the purpose. Then we'll go into the types of NSUF projects that we go with. A little bit of a talk about the sample library, which is becoming a more and more important feature of the NSUF. Talk about our partner facilities, capabilities overview, and then the types of NSUF proposals that will be coming in. These were already mentioned to a good extent already by Greg. And then finally, just some special considerations for the NSUF proposals themselves, which will lead then into Dan's presentation on actually accessing the NSUF and the process that we've set up for that. Now, for those of us who perform work on radiological materials and highly radioactive materials, we know that it's very difficult to do these types of examinations. And all this work that the research in support of nuclear energy development requires these are specialized and increasingly rare, and yes, they're often very expensive facilities, which includes reactors, nuclear reactors, and particularly in short supply these days are the high flux reactors. Also hot cells, very expensive, very rare for certain types of hot cells, like inert atmosphere hot cells. State-of-the-art instrumentation, we're increasing that as much as possible, but working on adapting or developing advanced instrumentation for the use of highly radioactive materials is a very important area for us. And then, of course, the supporting infrastructure, whether it's transportation or fabricating the tests themselves, these things are all increasing. The laboratories and what we can use are increasingly expensive, and they really are quite specialized. So what the NSUF intends to do is to merge on the national level what we have for capabilities in this area with our intellectual capital, and the intellectual capital being at the universities, the national laboratories, in industry, or in innovative small businesses. So the goal is to match and pair the best ideas with the capability that's needed. In a nutshell, the NSUF offers access to capabilities and expertise at no cost to the user. The NSUF can fund things like experimental design, fabrication of the irradiation test, transport of the materials, the irradiation itself, and of course then the post-irradiation examination activities. Quoting, as described in the 2007 transition plan, and the ATR-NSUF was founded in 2007. The mission of the ATR-NSUF is to provide nuclear energy researchers access to world-class facilities to facilitate the advancement of nuclear science and technology in the United States. The ATR-NSUF will accomplish this mission through provision of state-of-the-art experimental irradiation testing and PIE facilities and technical assistance in design and analysis of reactor experiments. So, what does the NSUF, that's what the NSUF is intended for. What does it not do? It does not fund the user R&D requirements such as salaries, travel, and other underlying costs. This is the purpose now of the integration of the NSUF into this FOA. The user funding requirements for those projects that require NSUF capabilities at no cost can be secured through this NSUF from either NEUP or the NEAT resources as part of a single project application. It's not a two-application process. This is a single application, and the entire concept will be reviewed. In general, the NSUF does not support the preliminary development effort of say, fuels and materials intended for irradiation. So if we are expecting that the materials are pretty much ready to go. If you have to develop a new type of fuel or a new type of structural material, it is recommended and that you go for an NEUP or a NEAT by itself in order to develop the material. And then when your material is ready for an irradiation test or PIE or however it might be in the types of projects that we support, then you come to the NSUF, and that would be a separate time period and application process. So these types of studies, whether it's scoping or, as I said, just development of the materials, we don't, in general, we would not support that. We will support, however, any pre-irradiation characterization that needs to be done on the specific fuels that are going into the reactor, for example, because those are just said it would be part of the test fabrication. And finally, NSUF projects are only for non-proprietary research intended for a peer-reviewed publication in the open literature. We do not do proprietary work. So the types of NSUF projects, the biggest ones and potentially the most complex are the irradiation plus post-irradiation examination. These are the ones that have been mentioned earlier by Greg that can go up to 7 years. One can imagine 7 years. We spend a year on the irradiation test design and fabrication, then a 3-year irradiation time period, and then a 3-year post-irradiation time period. We're limiting it to 7 years at this point. We'll see what happens in the future. The costs of these projects are typically about $1 million, but the experience has shown, and we have history that we have projects up to $3 million in costs. Any projects that are funded to whatever extent will, of course, be dependent upon the availability of funds in a particular year. The next is the irradiation only. These are to produce samples that can be analyzed by another project or another program. And we anticipate, again, as in the irradiation plus PIE, no more than a 3-year irradiation. And costs for these can typically be up to about $1 million, depending upon the complexity, and about, of course, is plus or minus 20% or something like that. Then we have the PIE only. This is post-irradiation examination only. These are where the irradiated materials are already on hand. These could come from a previous irradiation, another project or program's irradiation, or they can come from the sample library. Project duration is up to 3 years again. So as you can see, the irradiation only, which may or may not require some R&D support funding. PIE only, 3 years. That matches quite well with the limitations on the duration of the R&D, whether it's the NEUP or the NEAT R&D funding. These projects typically cost the NSUF about $500,000. And then finally, we have the beam time. We have access to the MRCAT line at the APS through the Illinois Institute of Technology and Jeff Terry for some beam time use. And we also can have neutron or positron access at the Pulsar reactor at North Carolina State University. These projects would be typically $100,000 to $200,000 in range. Now the sample library, this is a very important part to the NSUF. It is quite simply a catalog collection of irradiated materials that are made available to users. This is critical to reducing costs and taking advantage of new ideas, future analysis techniques and equipment, etc. The catalog is available, or the catalog of available materials can be found at the atrnsuf.inl.gov website, but look into the FOA for the full link into the catalog. In the process, we wish to develop the NSUF sample library, and the program office may recommend for any type of irradiation test a larger number of samples to be irradiated than required in order to expand and to populate the library further. This would be discussed with any particular PI on an irradiation test. Now we have NSUF has partner facilities. NSUF provides no-cost access to equipment and expertise at the Idaho National Laboratory and the Center for Advanced Energy Studies, Microscopy and Characterization Suite, the MAX Lab, and the following designated partner facilities with particular capabilities. And in the area of the national laboratories, it's Oak Ridge National Laboratory and Pacific Northwest National Laboratories. We have a number of universities, as I mentioned before, Illinois Institute of Technology, also Massachusetts Institute of Technology, North Carolina State University, University of California, Berkeley, University of Michigan, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, University of Wisconsin-Madison. And we have one industry partner, and that is Westinghouse, and it's at their Materials Center for Excellence. So with all these partner facilities, what are the general capabilities? We could spend quite a bit of time on this slide right here, but let's just say at the moment we have primarily three reactors. We have four reactors. We have the Advanced Test Reactor in Idaho. It has a loop and a rabbit capabilities. There's also the ATRC there. We have the high flux isotope reactor at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. They have the rabbit capabilities for short-term irradiations. We have the Massachusetts Institute of Technology reactor, the MITR, and they have a loop. And then we have the Pulsar reactor at North Carolina State University. We have ion irradiation capabilities at the University of Wisconsin or the University of Michigan. Hot cells, as I mentioned before, there's not very many of those, but we do have some at INL, we have some at Oak Ridge, at PNNL, and University of Michigan, and at Westinghouse. For very high-level measurements, high-level radioactivity measurements, we can do a variety of things. I don't need to go through these, every single one, but from down neutron radiography of the irradiated test rig down to preparing samples with the focused ion beam, which is a very important piece of equipment in order to reduce the radioactivity so that then we can send samples to the next, which is a lower radiation measurement instrumentation at INL and the partner facilities. And this increases even further the amount of instrumentation that we can apply to nuclear energy, nuclear fuels, and materials development. And this is, of course, a variety of microscopies, anaprobe tomography, even NMR, positron annihilation, etc. And then again, just to mention the beam lines again, we have the X-ray beam line at the APS with the MRCAT facility, and neutron and positron at the Pulsar reactor. For a list of all and a description of all the materials, all the capabilities at the different facilities, please visit the atrnsuf.inl.gov website and look under Research Capabilities tab to find the individual facilities in order to see what the capabilities are. Now, the types of NSUF proposals. As mentioned before, but we'd like to go over again, we can have NSUF plus an NEUP program supporting proposal. And then, of course, the NEUP plus program supporting is for the research, underlying research funding, R&D funding. NSUF offers the no-cost access to capabilities. NSUF plus NEUP mission supporting, NSUF plus the NEAT CTD program supporting, NSUF plus the NEAT CTD mission supporting, then NSUF access only, so all of your R&D funding, underlying funding is already taken care of from another source. The NSUF proposals, including R&D funding support, are subject to the conditions of the individual NEUP and NEAT CTD R&D funding areas when it comes into the review process. Now, finally, what special considerations are for the NSUF proposals. As of this year, all NSUF projects are to be fully forward funded upon award. In the past, awards were made and then they were mortgaged down the line as we were trying to fulfill the obligations of completing the projects. But from now on, and this is driving a lot of this, of our consolidation and a lot of the changes we're doing to the user facility at this point, all projects are forward funded from the year of the award. In addition, so now to the review process, in addition to the technical review, the relevancy review, and the priority reviews, which run in with the relevancy review, the NSUF projects require a feasibility review. You have to be able to understand whether we can get the work done at the facility and the time schedule at the cost that we anticipate. And so this is why we're including a technical lead from the user facility to lead the facility review and work with the PI to collaborate in the preparation of both the pre-application and the full application. This is why we're requiring a letter of intent that will identify, among other information that Dan is going to talk about right after this, and identifying the technical lead at the user facility at an early stage so that they can get working together. And finally, we do have what we call a user's agreement, and again, Dan will describe that. So at this point, I would like to introduce the Deputy Director to the HER National Scientific User Facility, Dan Ogden, and he's going to give you a bit more details on accessing the NSUF. So, Dan?
Thank you, Rory. I'm going to go through some of the details of accessing the NSUF. First steps, this will be very important, so if you don't pay attention to the rest of the presentation, make sure you catch the first steps. I'll talk a little bit about the letter of intent, pre-application, statement of work, an execution plan and cost estimate, scope negotiation and a final cost estimate if necessary, the full application, and then just a little bit about the user agreement. So first steps, if you're thinking about applying for NSUF access, either as an R&D project or access only, please take some time to review Appendix F in the FOA. There's a lot of new information in there that is new not only to people that have not accessed NSUF, but it's also new for prior users. So please take a look at that and then visit our website. The link is here. It's also in the FOA. And it's very important that you contact us. As Rory mentioned, we need to identify a technical lead. Technical lead is typically one of our research scientists that will work with you through this process to really understand what it is you want to do in the NSUF. So when you visit our website, it'll take you to our program administrator, Jeff Benson. You can also contact Roy Kennedy directly if you like, or myself, or Dr. Jim Cole, our principal scientist. So those are the faces you see there. You'll see us on our website. Okay, we've mentioned this before, but it's very important that we have a letter of intent for NSUF projects. As I talk through the process here, you'll have some understanding of why that's important. Those are due September 11th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. On the letter of intent, we will need to identify the principal investigator, the NSUF technical lead, title of the project, proposing associated institution, co-PIs, associated institutions, type of project. Rory mentioned the different types of project. We need to identify what that is. The type of R&D support requested, so we know whether it's an NSUF access only or whether it's coupled with program supporting or mission supporting. We also need a brief project description, less than 300 words. And now when that's ready, the PI will submit that on the NEUP website as part of the FOA. Okay, pre-application. Okay, our technical lead from the NSUF will work with the PI to develop the pre-application. When you take a look at Appendix F, you'll see a process laid out there, and I have the blocks from that on the slides. You can see the whole process in one snapshot there. And we're just going to walk through that sort of step by step. So once the pre-application is prepared, it can be submitted just like all the rest of the pre-applications. And then in parallel with this, we go down a little different path for NSUF. We have to figure out what the PI really wants to do in our facilities. And we have to figure out whether it's feasible and what it's going to cost. The PIs by themselves, of course, can't do that. So one of the early steps is to develop a statement of work. This really is a high-level requirements document that really defines what the principal investigator wants to do and gets into specifics on the specimens, what the irradiation requirements are, and what the examination requirements are, as well as providing a project timeline. So this really establishes the high-level and specific requirements that we need. Typically, the PI understands its objectives, and by putting together the statement of work, we'll take those objectives and turn them into requirements. Okay, that statement of work will be reviewed and approved by the NSUF program office prior to proceeding down the process. Okay, one of the next steps is to develop an execution plan and cost estimate. So the execution plan and cost estimate are prepared by the NSUF facilities, working with our technical lead. This will be based on the approved statement of work. And this gets into a little more detail to define the scope, define the schedule, define the cost. These are project management terms probably most of us are familiar with. And at this point, the program office will also review that execution plan and cost estimate. So now we may reach the point where some scope negotiation is necessary. We don't always know when we start these if we're going to fit within our ranges for the awards. So sometimes we need to make some adjustments to the scope, perhaps shorten the irradiation time frame, or maybe change some of the post-irradiation examination. But this negotiation would involve the PI, the NSUF technical lead in the program office, to decide if we need to trim things back a little bit. So we would reduce that scope to fit into our FOA criteria. We would go back and revise the statement of work and the cost estimate. So if a project gets to this point, it's most likely feasible because we understand everything that needs to be done, we understand the cost, we understand the timeline. This is when we know that a project is feasible. At this point, we're ready now for the full application. This also will be put together by the principal investigator, and our NSUF technical lead will support that. If you read the FOA carefully, you'll see that there are some slight differences in the project narrative page limits. If it's a program mission supporting NSUF access, if it's program mission supporting or an NSUF access only, it's limited to 10 pages. If it's coupled R&D application with NSUF, there's an extra 5 pages allowed to describe the specifics required for the NSUF access. As we mentioned earlier, we do have a non-proprietary user agreement that's part of the NSUF. There's an example of that in Appendix G of the FOA. This agreement is between Battelle Energy Alliance, the operator of the Idaho National Laboratory, and the PI's institution. The statement of work that gets developed earlier in the process will be attached to the user agreement. Those of you who worked with us in the past may remember that that statement of work was attached to a subcontract coupled to bridge funding, and we'll no longer have bridge funding as we move ahead. No work will actually start until the user agreement is signed by the PI's institution and BEA. So this is something you may want to get an early start on with your legal department so that it doesn't become something that prevents us from getting started after awards are announced. Okay, at this point I think we're ready for some questions. So Dr. Kennedy's going to come back up and help me with the questions. So the question is, what is the purpose of the letter of intent for NSUF since a pre-application is also required? Well, I looked at the overall timeline for the pre-application and what we need to do to determine if a project is feasible. We're going to need all the time possible to develop the letter or to develop the feasibility aspects of an NSUF proposal. So the letter of intent gives us a very early start, allows us to identify a technical lead to work with the PI, and allows us to get started on the statement of work and the cost estimates right from the get-go. Did you want to add anything, Roy?
No, it is. It's a matter of the amount of time in order to understand. It's particularly impactful for the larger radiation plus PIE, but also the PIE and the radiation testing, depending upon the complexity. Some of the tests are getting more and more complex. It takes more time to understand when and how we can perform these projects and to get a firm cost estimate going forward, since we have to fully fund all of these projects.
Okay, the next question is the FOA out yet? I cannot find it on the DOE website. It is not out yet. Dr. Gilligan's going to provide.
Well, not much to clarify there. The thing that I showed, this document is a draft, so the FOA itself is not out there on the web. It should be next week. Monday is what we're aiming for. So all the detail that you're receiving now is in advance of that. That shouldn't change at all, essentially, because we're basing all of our presentations on those.
NSUF is, if you have some ideas about what you would like to do, if you're thinking of a project that would require no-cost access to NSUF facilities, capabilities, you're very welcome to start contacting us right away to start discussing.
Will the owners of the ATR NSUF facilities be involved in the review process? Should the applicant contact the manager of the facility directly or contact the NSUF office?
We have the contacts for all of the partner facilities on the website. Those are the contacts you should use, or you can always contact the program office directly.
Are there any facilities missing from the list, for example, from Sandia or Brookhaven?
Yes, these we only mentioned the partner facilities, and we have a process for becoming a partner facility. We do not reject any facility or any piece of equipment that exists almost anywhere in order to perform the project. What would happen is that this would become part of the, we would have to include this in the cost estimate and the feasibility. We would have to investigate at the facility the access to whatever equipment this might be. And then if there is a cost associated, then the user facility would incur that. And of course, that would go into the entire fully forward funded cost estimate. So the answer is no. All capabilities are open to NSUF access. The ones that we presented here are only from the partner facilities, which we have special arrangements with.
Can a PI propose only an NSUF project without doing a parallel CINR R&D project?
Yes. It's called NSUF access only.
Do you have in situ testing capability that is under low-level radiation?
I'm assuming this is going to be in situ, would be in pile, in reactor measurement capability. And the answer is yes, but it's really quite limited. Those are the very complex projects and experiments, and of course then the cost goes up from there. So the answer is yes. If you're talking about on ion irradiation, there are also capabilities existing on the national level for in situ observation.
Are these the only opportunities with inclusion of the rapid turnarounds available for NSUF?
Yes, this is the one call we have per year for our larger projects, which radiation plus PIE, radiation only, PIE only, or the beamline, and then we have the 3 rapid turnaround experiment calls per year. So the answer is yes.
Will irradiation costs be included in the NUP R&D budget, or is there a separate budget that needs to be submitted?
The NSUF access costs will not be included in the NEUP budget, but there will be a separate place in the full application to enter the NSUF access value that comes out of our final cost estimate.
Can a proposal submitted as an NSUF joint NSUF NEUP project be changed to only an NSUF project once the letter of intent has been submitted?
I believe so. I don't think anything gets locked in there till the pre-application. So the letter of intent just gives us an idea what the PI has in mind.
And yeah, so in principle, the letter of intent is really included only for the NSUF part of the project, and so whether it really runs independent of the NUP R&D funding. So yeah, that would be.
How does the NSUF sample library work? Is there an online database of samples?
If you visit our website, you will find a link there to the sample library that lists a large variety of samples that are readily accessible on the sample library. We do also have some other samples that are not as accessible. You won't see those on our website. Some researchers may or may not know about those. What we're trying to aim the research towards is the samples that are easily accessible, but we're not restricting it to those either. So,
how should one apply for ATR NSUF access only on the application form?
is it a check? It's a checkbox. Those of us that haven't actually seen the pre-application form yet aren't quite sure how to answer that. But there is a check. There is a box there that would be checked on the pre-application and the application.
The letter of intent is not binding. I was having trouble hearing. Also, how do you identify collaborators in the letter of intent?
No, the letter of intent is not binding. If you can submit a letter of intent and not go forward with the pre-application. However, you cannot go forward with the pre-application without a letter of intent. And collaborators, again, for the letter of intent, as opposed to the pre-application where you really have to identify every single collaborator or co-PI, the letter of intent is intended to identify most, and particularly other institutions that you are interested in collaborating in. And the definition for a collaborator is probably found in Webster's, but it's someone with whom you are going to work together on the project to come to a final conclusion.